Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar by TJC on how to select the right path to S/4HANA for your business. My name is Jochen Hager. I'm a principal at TJC Americas and focus on customer service and business development. I'll be your host throughout the session, and I will present a quick overview on your legacy data solution by TJC ELSA after the presentation. We have with us today Ben McGrail. Ben is a specialist in SAP data migration and data management, and he is, excuse me for a moment, he is managing director of XMATERIA, which provides the expertise in data transformation technology to guide companies through the challenges of modernizing and migrating their landscapes. We will have a couple of topics on the agenda. We're setting the stage like we do now. We go through our presentation. We give you a little overview on TJC ELSA in context, and we end with a summary and your questions. There's also additional materials available to everybody on the call. And with this, welcome, Ben. Thank you for being here today. I hope we have a great presentation for the next 30 minutes, and we'll explore the three main migration options to S/4HANA: system conversion, selective data transitioning, and greenfield implementation. We'll explain how taking a data-led approach can help organizations assess the right path based on their current SAP landscape, future business objective, and overall readiness for change. And before I turn it over to Ben, a few administrative items. All participants are on mute during the full duration of the webinar. If there are sound issues or you cannot view the slides or the presenters, please alert us through the questions panel. Please post any questions or concerns through the questions function in your administration panel on the right side of the screen. The presentation today will take about 25 to 30 minutes, with 10 minutes reserved for questions at the end. And with that, I hand it over to you, Ben, and I will make you presenter, and
perfect, thank you.
You can take the slides and you should be able to go.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you see me? And can you see the slides?
We can hear you, we can see you, and we can see the slides. Perfect.
Perfect, thank you very much. Topic today is choosing the right path to S/4HANA for your business. And that for your business is probably the key point there. We're not advocating for any one particular path or saying that any particular paths are not good paths to S/4HANA. The key point is trying to find the right path, the right migration approach for your business and your requirements. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So just a quick introduction to me. Ben McGrail, I'm the Managing Director of XMATERIA. I've spent the last, my whole career really, focusing on SAP technical challenges, and in particular data migration challenges. I've worked for a number of organizations during that time, and I now run XMATERIA. We are a highly specialist, we say we're a highly specialist SAP data migration business. What that really means is it's the only thing we do. We don't do anything else except data migration into or out of or within SAP. So we work with customers and partners all over the world. There's two main things really that drive the work that we do. We work with a lot of kind of customers who are doing mergers, acquisitions, divestments, restructuring. So there's kind of like business-led reorganizational projects, often with carve-out technology. And then we work with customers who are modernizing, perhaps re-implementing their ERP. And of course, a large number of those are moving from ECC to S4, which is what we're doing today, what we're talking about today. So key point there really is we obviously try to help customers reduce the risk, reduce the effort, reduce the cost of that migration to S4. But we also look at how to help them increase the value, maximize the business benefit from that. And that's all about choosing the right approach and the right technology behind that. And data migration, the work that we do, is a key part of that. And some of the technologies you can use to drive these more evolved migration approaches can make all the difference to customers who are looking to drive benefit from their migration. Why is this important? There's a horrible number there for our industry, I think, which is that according to Gartner, 70% of all ERP change projects don't meet their business goals. 25% of those failing quite spectacularly. Some of that obviously is due to execution. Some of that though is due to, and you know, these aren't, that 70%, that's not projects that necessarily fail or got delayed or don't go live. It's projects that fail to meet their business goals, to draw a line from that initial business case through to the execution of the project. And some of that is about choosing the right method for migration. So let me start. This is an SAP slide that I use quite a lot to show how SAP talk about the migration routes to S4. System conversion at the bottom there, that is normally the cheapest, the quickest way to move to S4. For those of you familiar with the technology, that's often using SAP's own SUM DMO software to upgrade the system, and that's essentially what it is. It's an upgrade. If you want to drive further value, whether that's value in your data through cleansing and archiving or process change, that either needs to be done before or after the move to S4. At the other end of the scale, you've got a new implementation where you build your own S/4HANA system, often on RISE, from scratch. So without reference or without technical reference to the previous ECC system. Now you could do that through some kind of model company or a template-based approach, or you could do that through building your own system yourselves or with your system implementation partner. And you would then often use something like Migration Cockpit to migrate data through the application layer, object by object by object. And that normally means taking open and active data and leaving behind quite a bit of data that therefore doesn't get migrated. That's probably the longest and most costly, most effort in terms of the move to S4, but it does give you a lot of opportunity for driving value. And then this middle ground is what SAP would refer to as selective data transition, which other companies maybe refer to as brownfield plus, all field, blue field. There's all sorts of terms there. That's where we'll be spending the majority of our time today, mainly because a lot of people don't know about that, and so it feels like a sensible place to focus attention today. And there's quite a lot going on and a few options within that. So that's where we're going to spend a bit of time now. So if I take that to maybe a bit more our view of the world, which is that selective data transition is not one thing. What SAP means when it refers to as SDT, selective data transition, is what we're going to refer to today as full SDT. There's also a lean SDT option using a simpler approach, and there's a hybrid SDT option where you can take a bit of a mixed approach. And if we look at the scale of change, where you've got brownfield, that's maybe the easiest route, but gives you the least value, and at the other end of the scale, you've got the more involved, more complex route of building your own new system, but it's going to take the longest. That can drive the most change. Lean SDT, then full SDT, then hybrid SDT is probably the scale in which these things happen, and the order in which you might approach them from a business value perspective. So let's talk a little bit about what is selective data transition. So of course, it's a method for migrating from SAP ECC to S/4HANA. And I say that normally includes, because there are exceptions that we probably don't have time to go into today. But that normally means a shell copy of your current SAP ECC system, wherever that's hosted. You create that shell and upgrade that shell to S4HANA. So you create that shell in your target environment, which might, for example, be a hyperscaler platform via RISE, and you upgrade both the application to S4 and the database if you're not already on HANA. Now, once you've got that, that upgraded shell in your target environment, you can drive, well, we normally talk about targeted rather than widespread transformation of your solution. So if you wanted to completely reimagine whole swathes of how your business operates, then maybe selective data transition is not the right approach. But if you're looking at targeted change, so maybe a lot of your operational, your logistical processes, your warehousing are good as standard, and you want to adopt some targeted change, for example, going back to a simplified, more standardized approach with finance, then this might be the right approach to you. And then once that has been implemented, then you would normally use a table-based data migration software of the type that we would often use to drive a carve-out project. And that is a very quick way of migrating large volumes of data. You're able to migrate historical data through the table-based software, but also because that change on the right-hand side has been managed and restricted. And this is why, you know, we often don't, and I particularly don't like the term selective data transition. It makes it sound like a data migration method. It's really about how much change you want to drive from your move to S4, which is why we often refer to it as a selective transformation. So this brings all sorts of benefits, and I think it's best to look at those benefits by comparison with the two options at either end. It's a much quicker and cheaper route for moving to S4 than a new implementation. You could probably price that in at around half what it might cost you to drive a new implementation of S4, but it gives you much more flexibility and value than a system conversion. Now, I said at the beginning, you know, it's not the aim of this session to advocate for the adoption of SDT. This is just to explain what it is today by comparison with the other options. So there are some drawbacks as well, and we'll come back to those. So I'll just give you a very quick breakdown of how this works. So you start with your production system untouched, and you create a production copy of that. So you never really do anything to your production system through this method, which is one of the benefits of SDT, is that if things were to go wrong and you wanted to roll back, there is nothing, no rollback required. You just stay where you are on your existing production system, which runs and is untouched throughout this process. So you create a production copy using standard methods, and from that you can then create a shell copy which you move to your target environment. That's where you then that's the system that you then upgrade to S4, and then from that you can apply your targeted change. So obviously there would be workshops and discussions that go into what you want to change, but this is where your functional teams would come in and implement that change. Everything up until this point can be done completely in parallel with your working system, and now we're going to start to talk about the data migration in a production cycle. Obviously not in the test cycles, but in a production cycle, this is where you might go into downtime. And two things need to happen at this stage. First, the migration of the data from ECC to S4HANA, but because the S4HANA system is different, particularly people are particularly aware of the differences in the financial tables from BKPF, BSEG to ACDOCA. Because some of those tables are different, there then needs to be a data conversion. Now, there are 2 or 3 technologies you can use to drive selective data transition to do that historical data migration. It doesn't matter which one you use, they're all governed by SAP under a rather long phrase. They use this selective data transition community engagement working group. Underneath that working group, they're all governed by SAP, and all of them follow that approach: shell, then the migration, and then the conversion using and that conversion uses essentially the same data conversion that the brownfield would do. And this is why some people refer to SDT as a brownfield plus, because really you're breaking down that brownfield process, that upgrade process, taking data out of the way, upgrading it to S4HANA, and then putting the data back in, which allows you through some fairly advanced data migration technology to to upgrade with your historical data, but make change at the same time. So let's now break that down a little into the three options. So the first option, which, as you can see on the top right of the screen, is the one that drives the least amount of change, is the simplest and the cheapest. This is what SAP referred to as lean SDT. So you create a shell copy of SAP ECC to create your S/4HANA system. You go through that technical approach to create the shell, but you cannot drive process change through this option, which is why it's lean SDT. It's a bit like full SDT, but you can't drive the process change. You use SAP Business Transformation Center, which is an SAP software, to handle the data migration. And what that allows you to do is leave behind redundant companies and redundant fiscal periods. Soon, through the next release of the software, it will allow you to also drive a new GL upgrade through, but you can't make change to your financial processes, your logistical processes. So we say it's got minimal target solution transformation. Some of the mandatory things that you have to do when you move from ECC to S4 are covered, but you can't make targeted change to your SAP system. What you can really do is leave things behind. So this is one that you really could call a brownfield plus. Now you get into full SDT. So full SDT is what's normally understood when what we call full SDT is what is normally understood by the term selective data transition. You can create your shell copy of ECC, upgrade it to S/4HANA. You can drive the targeted solution transformation, and then you use a third-party landscape transformation software. One of the ones that has been is covered by SAP under the SDT working group. The software that we work with is from Natuvion. It's called Natuvion DCS, but there's a couple of options there. And you can then migrate across. You don't have to migrate across full history, but you can. And you can also make that targeted change. So it's a very, very powerful method for moving to S/4HANA. But we still say that that's targeted change, not widespread change. And if you want to go a bit further than that, then what you can do is consider a bit more of a hybrid approach. Now, this is our term, hybrid SDT, but really it's using the SDT approach fairly widely across your data set. So you can implement some targeted change. You can leave behind organizations. You can leave behind fiscal periods. But if there's a particular area where you want to drive widespread change, so let's say your financial processes, you want to bring in new currencies, you want to bring in parallel ledgers, you want to go from ECC to classic GL to new GL. If you want to do lots of different things, a profit center transformation, and really in your finance area, you're almost starting again. What you could do is you can just say, well, for the finance data, we will use the BAPI-based approach where we're bringing in object by object. We'll bring open items, GL balances, and those GL balances could go back a couple of years. And for everything else, we'll follow the table-based approach. That then gets a lot of customers what they need, which is that for their operational data, they want to bring across their full transactional history. This is fortunately also the areas of S/4HANA that don't look so different from ECC. They're the areas that often they don't want to drive a lot of change from, but in finance, they almost want to go back to something much more standard. So then we say, well, leave behind all your years and years of financial history, bring across your open positions, your starting positions in finance, and then you kind of get the best of both worlds. So that's something that you can consider as well. And that's why, hopefully, from that explanation, you can see why we lay it out in this way, where you've got your system conversion, which is pretty much upgrading your system as is. Lean SDT, similar, but allows you to leave behind a lot of data. And we'll come back to what happens with some of that data that gets left behind. Jochen will pick that up. Then the full SDT, where you move to a paid-for third-party software that allows you to drive targeted change from that move, to a hybrid SDT, where you can say, actually, we're almost going to follow a greenfield approach for a little bit of this system and then do the rest SDT, through to a full new implementation of S/4HANA. And that's a range of options there with a range of efforts. Now, you would normally say, that the system conversion is easier than lean SDT, which is easier than full SDT, which is easier than new implementation. The difference there is that that hybrid SDT could, in more complex scenarios, be a bit simpler than the full SDT. So there's quite a lot going on there. There's quite a lot to talk about in more detail with customers when they're making this choice. So for now, just to summarize, we're getting towards the end of my part of this session now. I think it's most useful to look at, when we're talking about selective data transition, it's useful to look at those benefits and the drawbacks versus the two options. So I think one of the key points for today would be is there are very few customers that would be saying, we don't know whether we're going to do a new implementation or do a system conversion. They know at which end of the scale they are. They're kind of looking at a system conversion, but might want to bring in a bit more value than that and put a bit more into the project. Or they're looking at starting from scratch, but is there an option that's not quite as complex as that still gives us the value? So I think it's important to look, that's where customers tend to be. They're either looking at the left-hand side of this equation or the right-hand side and trying to work out exactly where they are. So the benefits versus system conversion of this kind of approach, obviously you can bring in the change. A lot of customers are on multiple systems. We're just doing a project at the moment with a chemical company who's on 3 ECC systems looking to move that into S4. If they wanted to do a system conversion, it would be 3 ECC systems to 3 S4. Whereas with selective, you can bring those into one target. You can obviously leave behind older data and redundant company codes, even in the example of lean SDT, which really means you can avoid multiple projects. So if there are things that you do want to do as part of your migration, and you're thinking that system conversion is maybe the cheapest, the most simplest route, well, you've got to then look at, but what about these other projects that you could bring into an SDT that you would have to do as separate projects? We're talking to a customer at the moment who's just done a system conversion to S4, and now they want to delete 100 company codes that they no longer use. Really? They should have looked at a lean SDT before the project, and they could have done that in one project rather than having to now do a second project to go and delete or archive off data that they didn't want. The benefits versus new implementation: simpler, cheaper, less risky, less costly. Allows you to migrate full or time-sliced historical data, integrated historical data. You couldn't do that, or much harder to do that with a greenfield new implementation. You can leverage that previous investment in SAP. You're not having to start again. And from a business perspective, from a testing perspective, you can focus your effort on the high value change. So your design, your workshops, your customizing effort, your testing effort can primarily be focused on the effort of high value change rather than on re-implementing processes that were largely there in the ECC system. But, and this is where I say again, this is not to advocate for this approach, there are downsides and constraints. It is more complex and costly than a simple system conversion, and it's less flexible than a new implementation. And to a certain extent, it's probably less common, less well known by customers than either of those. It's a less well-trodden path. Therefore, you need to put the effort in to really understand how this is going to work. So that's the end of the options. Just a quick word on how we would normally work with customers. So we actually, as I said at the beginning, we do a lot of we're a data migration specialist business. So we deliver data migration work streams, whether that's greenfield, whether that's selective. Not so much on brownfield, obviously, because there's no data migration to do, but we might do some of the data management work ahead of a brownfield. So we deliver that data migration work. And then we also, sometimes when an SI has been selected for a greenfield project to deliver the whole thing, we will do some advisory, some client-side advisory to make sure that the data migration work stream is being delivered properly. And then up front, we will do data discovery. And this is where we can really help, I think, to support customers and guide them through what's the right approach for them. It's really important to start with, from your perspective, what are you trying to achieve from this project? So that kind of top-down objective, that top-down strategy. And then we can support with data discovery work, which then looks at the system as is and feeds bottom up and says, well, if you wanted to follow this type of project or that type of project, what would the effort be? What would the complexity be? What would the cost be? And to do that, we work with a piece of software, which is our piece of software called Pioneer. And regardless of which approach you're thinking of using, we can use that software to really help you understand your system. What organizational areas do you have? What kind of business data? How's that business data separated across the organizational areas? What happens if you left behind, your HR work stream? And because that's moving off to success factors. What happens if you left behind some companies that have been divested or mothballed? What happens if you left behind 15 years of transactional history because you only need the last 5 or the last 10? We can help you break that down and work bottom up. Now, our focus, and this is, Jochen, where I would hand back to you, our focus is on helping customers understand the data to be migrated, but there's another side there, which is the data that gets left behind, particularly in a selective or greenfield scenario. What happens with that? And that's where I'll hand back to Jochen.
And thank you very much. That was really a great overview on the different options that you have when structuring your transition to S/4HANA. I particularly liked your focus on the data and how customers can decide what pieces of data needs to be migrated, how, and how that fits into their overall vision and strategy and direction of the company, and how they can apply that data-driven approach to selective data transformation. And I believe this fits right in with our approach as TJC, working with customers on what happens to the data that is left behind, especially if you don't take everything, if you only take a part of what you currently have into the future. And with that, we have at TJC developed a tool that allows you to capture that data that is left behind and make that available in a BTP app. And let me share my screen here and show the audience a few data points to that. So we have developed at TJC an application that we named ELSA. It's an SAP native application built and certified on the SAP BTP. It can handle legacy data, documents, reports, and make them accessible again in a Fiori-like application. And it visualizes all the aspects of the system that you have or want to decommission, the system that is left behind. And with a fully embedded audit trail as proof of compliance, deletion functionality, data privacy requirements, considerations for the different laws that are in place in the different countries, extensive authorization management, and also data masking features. The approach is really quite simple and straightforward. We start with extracting 100% of your ECC legacy application data. We load that into a blob storage, so you have everything stored safely for as long as you need it. And from there, we selectively upload for the business processes that are most relevant for you and maybe cover the parts of your business that you did not take into S/4HANA for t-shirt size consideration and else. And also we have the capability to load more if you need to. We can unload, and we have a full user access model here. So 100% of the relevant SAP data is extracted, data tables, documents, attachment, reports. We do an upload and import into ELSA on a business process oriented scheme. And we have full user authorization management and go live functionality built into the product. Also, which is quite important to understand, we have the capability to fully fit into SAP's new data-centric model, into what SAP calls the business data fabric, with our components, the extract component, the data component, the document management component, the ELSA access component, all these fit right into your data model. And that is especially important if you look at and consider using artificial intelligence functionality, because you do want the data, you want the legacy data. The legacy data is basically the gold you built up over 10, 15, 20 years of your operations, and you don't want to lose that data. It's very valuable for your organization, and it should be available for you to make future decisions based on AI applications. And the next slide, and with that, a quick summary. So ELSA is an SAP certified, built on SAP BTP. It's has a text archive functionality. It's AI ready, and it presents a very good cost savings opportunity compared to letting your legacy system run, or even putting it on ice and on a VMware, which is not really a future-oriented option. So with that, we get to our questions, and let me check here on what we have here in terms of questions. And Ben, I think here's a question that would fit you. What are the one or two most important things when selecting your approach? You're on mute, Ben, right now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so
okay,
again,
can you hear
question, me? Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
A bit complicated.
So let me repeat the question. So we have here one question from the audience. What are the one or two most important things I should consider when selecting my approach?
I think the most important thing is to work back. I think a certain number of customers almost start from what they believe the approach will be, and then try to work out what they can achieve with that approach, instead of starting from a real business-led set of objectives for the project. So start with the business case. Start with that. What is it you want to achieve from this? I sometimes think the best S/4HANA projects, the best implementation projects, are driven off the back of a wider business transformation, rather than started from the point of an IT transformation and then sold to the business. So I would always start from the business requirements first, and then a bit more specific to the work that we do, I would consider the data very, very early. An early approach on data. I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone who said we didn't really need to start thinking about our data as early as we did. Most people, when they start these kind of projects, will think, I wish we'd started a bit earlier with our data. The kind of strap line for our company and our approach for this kind of thing is data-led SAP transformation. I think data can tell you so much about about your system, and we often refer to what we call data procrastination, where customers know it's going to be hard, or they think it's going to be hard, and they're worried about data, and they leave it far too late. So I would bring those two things together in a really strong kind of phase zero or business objectives piece of work up front, where you start top down with what you're looking to achieve from a business perspective. What are the benefits of doing this work? Why are we doing it? And then bottom up, look at the data, look at what that tells you about your system, look at the opportunities that gives you to take some weight out and maybe archive off, leave behind some of that, and look at what it tells you about the complexity of the project coming up. Bring those two things together into a really strong phase zero exercise.
Thank you. And there's another question, I think, that kind of ties right into what you said. So in that decision process, the question is, what data do I take, and how do I decide what to take and what to leave behind? Is there a rule of thumb for that?
Well, I think you'd look at that through a few lenses. One would be the functional lens. So which processes are you taking across? So a common one that gets left behind here is HR and payroll that gets moved off to SuccessFactors and doesn't go to S/4HANA. Another lens would be historical. Are you taking across just active and open data? Do you want to take across integrated history? So where you could click from a purchase order through to an invoice receipt, through to accounts payable, through to the clearing document. And if you want to take your integrated historical data, do you want to take all of it, or do you just want to take some of it? So that kind of historical view. And then the third lens to look at this through is an organizational lens. We always start these data discovery exercises with an organizational analysis. So you might have a customer that has 50 company codes in SAP, but once you start looking into the transactional data associated with that, then you might find that they only have 20 or 30 active company codes. So the others would then be strong candidates for either deletion or archiving, and certainly not to be migrated into an operational system. There's maybe a fourth lens there, which is your custom data. You know, we will see when we run the data discovery exercises, we'll see, you know, thousands sometimes of custom tables in ECC. Ideally, you don't want to be taking all of those across to S4. You want to be simplifying your system as much as possible, because all that customization slows you down as you look to transform your business and transform your systems in the future. So you would ideally look to leave some of that behind as much as possible while making the move.
Great, thank you very much. And we have one more question here, and I think that one is actually quite insightful, because it's something that a lot of people consider approaching in a different way. The question is, how and when should I start my decommissioning project? And I have a very personal opinion about that. I do think that the decommissioning project is really best started at the beginning of your S/4HANA transformation. When you look at the data, you should look at the data in a holistic way. You should look at the data not only on what you want to take and where it goes. You also need to understand and plan for what happens with the data that is left behind. And I see a lot of customers that we work with that finish their S4 project, and then everybody is exhausted at the end of the project, and they're so ready to go on with their normal lives and not have another project. And somebody from IT comes in, yeah, now what about my legacy system? How do I shut that down? How do I get rid of that? And they get pulled into the same discussions again. So what should I now take is very similar to the story you the example you gave before, that people did a full transformation and then figured out, oh my God, I want to get rid of these company codes and these plans and everything, and kind of do that at the end. So tagging that decision process onto the end of your S/4HANA project is not a good idea, in my opinion. It works all much more smoothly, much cheaper, much more organized when you start your decommissioning project from day one and plan for that. And even if you have other systems, satellite systems that are on the fringe of your S4 system, we can look at those, plan those, and stop those as well at the end of your journey, and you have a clean new system and all the legacy and everything is done. So to that question, I would say think about it early and get started with it early on. And I think we have reached the end of our session for today. This concludes our webinar. We hope you enjoyed the content and got some very good takeaways. Ben, thank you very much. Great presentation, very insightful. I can't wait to hear more and interact with you more. It was great to have you today. I know you had some logistical challenges, but I'm glad we got through this. Excellent, very nice. And to our audience, check out the download area of this webinar. We have made some slides available for you, as well as some solution brief information. Feel free to contact us. And before we say goodbye, I would like to remind you that there is the next session coming up in just a couple of weeks. It's about unlocking SAP S/4HANA's artificial intelligence potential, data quality as your hidden advantage, with Andreas Welsch from Intelligence Briefing, an SAP expert on artificial intelligence. Please sign up and to the series, and I hope to see you next time. Thank you very much, everybody. Bye-bye, Ben. See you soon. Bye.